Our next witness would wish to be known as Sue, would she?
That's correct, sir.
Sue, please.
Okay.
Please state your full name
Susan Elizabeth Harrison.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely
I do solemnly, sincerely,
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Sue, you're here to give evidence about your infection with hepatitis C.
Yes.
Your mother had von Willebrand's disease, and she had died in September 1976.
Yes.
And then in October 1976, it was recommended that you were tested for blood-related problems.
Yes.
What happened?
I was asked to attend Sheffield Royal Infirmary at, I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning. It was a long time. And the nurse, I went into a room and the nurse said, I'm going to take a measured amount of blood from you and then I'm going to put the same amount of factor 8 and inject it back. And then after 15 minutes, I'm going to take a blood sample. After half an hour, a blood sample. After an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours and 12 hours. So it was a long day. And after that, I never heard any more. So I just assumed all was right. And it never occurred to me that it wouldn't be.
You were never told about any results from those tests?
No.
And was there any reason, other than your mother's von Willebrand's, that you were given for having those tests?
No.
Before having those tests, were you warned about any risks of infection?
No.
What have you done to try and find a record of those tests?
We've written to, my husband and I wrote to a number of surgeries when we found out that I had been infected. We wrote to a number of surgeries to try and track back my medical records because my medical records, there were gaps in them. So from the test in 1976, we wrote to, I think it was 3 surgeries, and I also got in touch with the archives from Sheffield Royal Infirmary, which no longer existed, and we couldn't find anything, but we did our utmost to try and track missing records down.
So you've got no medical records that deal with you having had those tests?
None, no.
We've invited the hospital to respond to your statement, and they've provided us with a statement confirming that there are no records available, so they cannot categorically state the reason for the testing. Just to check a couple of things with you, have you ever had any bleeding problems?
No.
You've had 2 children.
Yes.
Did you have any bleeding problems then?
No.
Have you ever received any other blood products?
No.
And do you have any other risk factors for hepatitis C?
No.
And it was on the basis of all of that information and your very clear recollection of precisely what the test was,
Yes.
that your hepatologist wrote to the Skipton Fund confirming that in his view that was how you had contracted hepatitis C.
Yeah.
There's nothing else in your records that could indicate that you could have been infected in any other way than those tests. Can you tell us how you found out that you had hepatitis C?
Yes. 2008, we'd bought a small holiday apartment in North Cyprus.
Can you just keep your voice up a little bit more?
Right. We'd bought a small holiday apartment in North Cyprus and we drove out in May 2008 and we wanted to leave a car there because we knew we would be coming backwards and forwards because we were retired. And in order to import the car without having to pay a lot of purchase tax, we had to apply for what's called temporary residence. And to get that, you had to have a number of blood tests We didn't understand why, but that's what you did, so that's what we went and did. And a week later, the laboratory who'd taken the blood tests rang up, said, Mr. Harrison, you're fine, but Mrs. Harrison, I'm sorry, you've got an infection in your blood, so we need to redo the tests. So we went back and they took some more tests, and a week later asked us back in again, and she said, I'm very sorry, Mrs. Harrison, you've got hepatitis C. And I didn't know a lot about hepatitis C. I'd heard of hepatitis, but to be honest, I had no idea really. And what I do remember her saying is, but as your husband's clear and you're measured, you're married, I'm sure the authorities will look with sympathy upon you. And I'd not a clue what she meant, till a few days later, when the information we had then was what we were getting on the internet, which was not positive. It was all very negative. Keep it quiet, don't tell anybody. People will treat you like a leper. So basically I was hiding in the flat.
In Cyprus?
In Cyprus, yeah. And Trevor got a phone call from the police asking him to take my passport in. And I went with him, and this was a Thursday, and they took the passport off me and looked at it and then said, come back tomorrow. And I went, can I have my passport back? No, you can't have your passport back. Come back tomorrow, we'll explain then. And we were asked to go back at 8 o'clock in the morning. And when we went in, we could tell that behind the desk, the police were actually quite uncomfortable, and one of them was talking to another and talking to another. Obviously, I didn't understand what they were saying because they were talking in Turkish. And in the end, one of them came up and said, right, Mrs. Harrison, we're supposed to arrest you and put you in prison till the army can deport you. And at that point, I collapsed. Because I was a law-abiding citizen. Why would anybody want to put me in a prison, in a cell? And the police said, it's okay, we are not going to put you in a cell, but the army will be back in touch and then they will deport you. So we went back to the flat. And I can remember keeping looking out of the lounge window, expecting an army vehicle to come round the corner, and thinking, what am I going to do if they put me in a prison cell? What am I going to do? So on the Monday, over the weekend, we got in touch with the solicitor. And the solicitor said, get a flight out. You will be deported, there's nothing surer. So why don't you do it before the army does it to you? Because the thing is, they just put you on the first available plane. They're not bothered where you go as long as you leave. And I would have ended up in Istanbul on my own, seriously. So Trevor got me a flight going out of the south. Went back to the police station, showed the police the flight details and arranged for us to go through the border at 3 o'clock in the morning, on the Tuesday morning, so there'd be nobody else there, because I couldn't cope with. So when we got to the border at 3 o'clock in the morning, Trevor went with his passport, and he had to have a bit of, signed a thing for Trevor to leave, and I then had to get out of the car, and the policeman asked me to sign this document, and all I can remember about it is it was 4 sides of A4, all in Turkish, and he pointed to where I had to sign my name, and underneath it just said undesirable immigrant. And I got back in the car and cried all the way to the airport, because that was our retirement plans, whatever. We'd no idea then how ill I was, what state my liver was in, nothing. That's how I found out.
And the emotional impact of that on you in those early months was significant.
Absolutely huge. I felt so dirty. I didn't want anybody to touch me in case I made them dirty. And I came home 3 days before Trevor, and I can remember going with a friend to meet my youngest son, and I can remember saying to John, "You can't cuddle me, kid, because you could catch something. And all I'm worried about is if you ever have babies, I won't be able to cuddle them."
Three years later, you tried to return. You were fighting to be able to return to North Cyprus, and there was
Yes.
some press coverage. Could we have document 0625002? Because in this you are quoted, and your experience is explained. In the second column on the first page, it's not in crystal clear, but it says, "I was already desperately traumatised from the news I had hepatitis C. It took me by surprise. When the police told me that they were supposed to arrest me and put me in a cell before being deported, well, it was just indescribable what I thought. I couldn't get my head round it because I'd done nothing wrong. We come from a society where you go to prison because you've done something wrong, not because you're ill. I was a 58-year-old retired nursery school teacher. Things like that didn't happen to people like me." That's how you felt.
Yes, and I think my father was a policeman, and that's had an impact on all my adult life, to be honest and straightforward. That's all I can say, really.
You then had to have your sons had to be tested, and they were clear.
Yeah,
But you described that as very traumatic while you
Yes.
waited.
yes.
Have you received any counselling or psychological support?
When I started treatment at the Hallamshire Hospital for the hepatitis C, the department there was a marvellous department, and they put me in touch. I can't remember Thea's surname, but she was the social worker attached to the department, and she helped me a great deal and put me in touch with a support group, some ladies of which I'm still friends with now. And also the GP organised some counselling for me, which I'd forgotten all about till this morning.
And you say you found that incredibly helpful.
Particularly the support group, because you were with people who knew how you felt. You didn't have to explain things. People accepted you for who you are. You felt you could have a cuddle, be honest, say how tired you felt, it was a great comfort, the support group, and very important.
Before your diagnosis in Cyprus, you had actually not been particularly well physically.
That's true.
Can you tell us about that?
I started with insomnia, stomach pains, headaches, sometimes all of them, or one or the other. And you'd go to the doctor and IBS, because that's all tummy pains are, or you go into the menopause, or nobody ever did any testing. You just sort of get fobbed off and fobbed off and fobbed off. And in the end, I became so tired and stressed because I couldn't sleep that I talked it over with Trevor, and we decided the only sensible thing I could do was go to work part-time, because I was too tired to have a management role, and I just wasn't coping with my job properly at all.
But at that stage, you had no idea what was wrong.
No, nothing, no idea at all.
So you're then in Cyprus and you're diagnosed. When you returned to the UK, as you say, you were referred to the hospital. What information were you given at that stage about hepatitis C?
That it was a serious liver disease, that there was treatment, that I had the viral load in my liver from the hepatitis was very high, and that I did have a choice whether to have treatment or not, but I was very insistent that I needed treatment because whatever it was in my liver, I needed it gone. It was a 50-50 chance that I'd clear the virus, and they kept a very close eye on me, the hospital.
And you're very positive about the amount of information you were given at that stage?
Yes, yeah.
And the degree of understanding that you feel you had about the hepatitis C?
Absolutely. It was, as far as I was concerned, it was the best department I could have been referred to.
In 2009, you began treatment.
I actually began treatment in 2008 in September.
September 2008, you began treatment with interferon and ribavirin.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that was like?
You had to learn to self-inject the interferon, and you knew for the first 24 hours after you self-injected you weren't going to feel very well because you got flu-like symptoms. The ribavirin had to be a particular dose depending upon your weight, and I had quite a lot of side effects. Insomnia, but during the day I couldn't stay awake, but at night I couldn't sleep. And it's very lonely at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're on your own. My hair went thin, some of it came out, my skin was dry, nausea, diarrhoea, vomiting.
You had some dental problems as well.
Yeah, but fortunately the dentist that I went to had been my dentist for quite some years, and Darren was marvellous and never made me feel anything other than a normal patient.
After 40 weeks of treatment, the HCV had not cleared.
No.
So it was extended.
Yes.
How long for?
Another 24 weeks. I think I was on treatment in the end for 78 weeks in total. And at that point, I'd been going through a very bad patch of vomiting and diarrhoea for about 6 weeks, and I felt so ill that I do remember saying to Trevor, I shan't do anything silly, Trevor, because I'm not that way built, but I just want to go to bed, go to sleep and never wake up again. He then got in touch with a specialist nurse that morning, and I got to see them that day. This is how good they were, and one of the things they insisted I tried was fluoxetine, and I'm still on fluoxetine now.
You've said that the effects of the treatment on you and your family life were huge.
Yes.
Can you tell us what particularly it was like?
Well, I couldn't go. I didn't have the energy to go out. I didn't want to go anywhere. There were times when, because Trevor was fighting with a human rights group to try and get the decision overturned in North Cyprus, there were the odd occasion when I was on my own at home, and for 2 or 3 days, and that was, if friends didn't ring and say, are you all right, I just used to sit in the corner of the settee with my knees under my chin and try and cope. We didn't have a social life. The only thing I can say is that our family and friends, once we'd decided to be straightforward with them and tell them, were marvellous and very supportive, and nobody treated me like a leper, which made a huge difference to me.
You said in your statement you don't know what you'd have done without those friends and family.
No, I don't.
You eventually cleared the virus.
Yes, got my SVR.
And during all of this time, and particularly once you'd cleared the virus, you fought to be allowed to return to Cyprus.
Yes.
And if we can go to document 0625003, Another press clipping from Cyprus from about the same time as the previous one. We can see at the top of the second column, despite the great news that after intensive treatment she's now cured from the disease, the inflexibility of the TRNC laws were exposed when it was revealed to the Harrisons that the deportation order was still valid. So initially, even once you'd cleared the hepatitis C, you still couldn't return to Cyprus.
No.
As you say, you were involved with a human rights group, embargoed,
Yes.
and eventually the deportation order was lifted.
Yes.
How did you feel at that point?
Very excited, but the thing that had happened, which we were told I could come back, so we flew into the south, stayed overnight in a hotel, and a friend picked us up and we went through the border, and I assumed, very naively, that because they'd said all was clear I could go through, well, they wouldn't let me in. Which sounds crazy, doesn't it? So we're at the border, and they got in touch with the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Health said, oh, you can't come in through the land border, you've got to come in through the air border. So you need to fly back to England and come in again through Turkey, which was ridiculous. So in the end, they put me in a cabin, and the police were lovely. They kept bringing me cups of tea, and my husband and my friend went to the Ministry of Health, Ministry of the Interior, who then got in touch with the Ministry of Health, who said, this is ridiculous. If Mrs. Harrison's here, Mrs. Harrison's here. So 2 inspectors came back with my husband and our friend and said, yes, you can come in, but you're going to have to put yourself under quarantine. And as soon as you're in, we need you to go back to the hospital for a blood test. And we offered to go straight there, and they went, no, come in on Monday morning when we're prepared for you. And the thing about that was they only did the initial blood test, they didn't do the PCR test. So I knew it would come back positive because, like any hep C sufferer, I will always have the antibodies. And we're saying we had to pay for the test, and I'm saying it's a waste of money because it's going to come back positive. It's going to have to be a PCR test, but no, we had to go ahead, have the basic test, and then when that came back positive, go back, have another PCR test, and finally they agreed that I could come back. So when we came back at Easter, and we did come in through the land border, and I was very lucky that the lady who saw my passport said, oh, I remember you. You were in the papers at Christmas. We know it's all right. And they still hadn't really sorted it out. But after that, there were no more problems.
Since clearing the virus, what's your physical condition been like?
Probably better than I was before.
Before you were diagnosed with
Before I was diagnosed, yes. I mean, I'm getting on. I get old. I've got aching joints and whatever. So I don't know, because I don't know what I would have been like if I'd never had hep C. Because that I just don't know. But I'm okay, and life's okay, and that's it, really.
Your husband said earlier that he thinks you're very tired.
Yes.
And much more tired than you should be for your age.
Yes, that's probably so. But I just put it down to getting older, because it's like I said, I don't know what I would have been like.
Have you had any monitoring of your liver since you cleared the virus?
Only just recently.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it wasn't until I came to the preliminary meeting here some months ago.
One of the engagement meetings
Yes.
for the inquiry.
Yeah, that I found out that I should have been being monitored after I was discharged in 2010. I had a FibroScan in 2010. I had to go down to Nottingham because Sheffield didn't have the equipment. And I haven't heard or had anything since then, but apparently I should have been having regular liver scans and ultrasounds and viral loads done. So I got in touch with the GP, went to see my GP, and my GP referred me back to infectious diseases. I went several weeks ago, and the young man there said, the doctor, and I think it was Dr. Darton, said, you should have been called back after 4 years for us to do another PCR test and check your liver. And I went, haven't heard. And other people in my situation also haven't heard either, so it's not just peculiar to me. So that day they did actually arrange for me to have a FibroScan, which has come back as normal. I'm seeing the specialist in July and have an ultrasound in July, and I'm also assuming that when I see the specialist in July they'll give me the result of the blood test that they took that day a few weeks ago.
But from the date that you cleared the virus through until very recently, you had had no monitoring for your liver or any contact in relation to your liver?
No, and the other thing I was completely unaware of was the variant CJD until I found out from that first meeting.
And do you have concerns about that?
Well, yes. I mean, it's nowhere to go, is it?
But you've not received any letters in relation to the VCJD?
No.
You've received some payments from the Skipton Fund.
Yes.
How did you find that process?
Quite challenging because my medical records were missing. There was no way other than verbally I could prove I'd had that particular blood test. So on initial application it was turned down, but with support from Professor McKendrick, who was the consultant at the time, and support from the Hep C Trust and Nick Clegg, who was my MP, and letters from friends who remembered me having the blood tests. On appeal, it was accepted as the only logical way I could have got the Hep C.
You say in your statement that in order to receive the payment you had to sign a waiver. What do you recall of that?
Just that this was a one and final payment and that there was no way I could come back and claim any more.
Those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Yes. Until Friday and listening to other people's statements, I knew my story was difficult, but the statements I've heard on Friday and this morning, I just want to say thank you for letting me tell my story. It feels very minor compared to what I've heard. And whoever is responsible, I hope, Sir Brian, you can bring them to book, because the things I've heard are just beyond belief. And thank you.
I'm just going to turn and ask Mr. Snowden, who, as you know, represents you, if he has any points he wishes me to raise. There's nothing from him, sir.
You may feel that your story is not as significant as others, but let me tell you that it is unique. And what you've described has, I think, held everyone who's been listening. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, we'll take a break until 2 o'clock when we hear our next witness, who again is anonymous. I shall say more about that at 2 o'clock.